She stepped out of the car and looked around, feeling the quiet air of the small town. The place was slower than what she was used to. No tall buildings, no rush of people crossing the streets, no sound of honking cars. Just a calm breeze, a few children running after a ball, and an old man selling tea on the corner. For a second, she wondered if she had made the right decision coming here, but she reminded herself it was just work. A short trip to close a deal and then back to the city where she belonged. Her driver carried the small suitcase behind her as she walked toward the hotel entrance. She had been on the road since morning and her back ached a little. She checked in, signed a few papers, and took the key card. The young receptionist smiled warmly and said, "Welcome, ma'am. If you need anything, just call." She nodded politely, but her mind was elsewhere. Tomorrow was the big meeting, the one that would decide whether her company would expand in this region or not. Inside her room, she opened the curtains and looked outside. The town looked peaceful. From her window, she could see the river, the factory in the distance, and a few small houses. Everything looked too simple, almost too slow for someone like her. She had built her career in the fast lanes of city life. Meetings, presentations, late nights, and endless phone calls. That was her world. Love, friendship, and rest had all been pushed to the side long ago. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her phone. No missed calls, no messages. She sighed softly. Sometimes success can make you feel very alone. She remembered her mother's words from years ago. You'll have everything you want one day, but don't forget to have someone to share it with. She had brushed that off back then. She thought love was a distraction, something that slowed people down. But lately, in quiet hotel rooms like this one, her mother's words often came back to her. The next morning, she woke up early. She dressed neatly, wearing a light blue shirt and a beige blazer. Her hair was tied back, her bag packed with documents and a laptop. She checked herself once in the mirror, confident, calm, professional, just how she needed to be. She had a reputation for being direct and smart, but also a bit cold. People in her company respected her, but no one really knew her. When she reached the factory, she was surprised to see how simple it looked. No fancy glass walls or big offices, just a large building with workers moving around, machines humming, and the smell of metal and paint in the air. She met the secretary at the entrance, who guided her to the office upstairs. As they walked, the secretary smiled and said, "Our boss doesn't usually like city people, but I'm sure you'll change his mind." She gave a polite smile, pretending she hadn't heard that. When she entered the office, she saw a man standing near the window, talking to someone on the phone. He turned when she walked in. He wasn't what she had imagined. Instead of a formal suit, he wore a plain white shirt with rolled-up sleeves. His face looked calm but serious. He ended the call, nodded, and said, "You must be from the consulting firm." She nodded, introducing herself and offering her hand. He shook it firmly, but his expression didn't change much. They sat across from each other, and she started explaining her proposal. Numbers, strategies, plans, everything clear and confident. He listened quietly, his eyes sharp but unreadable. When she finished, he asked a few questions, not aggressive but practical. His voice had a kind of steady calmness that made her pause. He didn't seem impressed by big city talk. After an hour, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You've done your homework, but business here isn't just numbers. People here trust faces more than papers." She smiled lightly and replied, "I understand. That's why I'm here, to earn that trust." He nodded, still studying her as if trying to figure her out. Their conversation ended on a formal note. He said he would review the proposal and give his decision in a few days. She thanked him and left the office. Outside, she took a deep breath. Something about that man unsettled her. He wasn't rude, but there was a quiet strength about him. Someone who didn't need to prove himself with words. Over the next few days, she spent most of her time at the factory, observing how things worked. She was surprised to see how well the workers respected him. They called him sir, but there was warmth in the way they spoke to him. He treated them kindly, knew their names, asked about their families. It was unusual for her. She had worked with many executives before, but few had that kind of genuine care. One afternoon, while reviewing some files in the small office corner, she heard laughter outside. Curious, she stepped out and saw him helping a small girl fix her broken bicycle. The child, maybe 7 or 8, was smiling up at him, calling him uncle. He looked different, lighter, warmer, almost playful. The girl's happiness made him laugh too. That small moment stayed with her the whole day. It showed a side of him she hadn't seen before. That evening, while going through her notes, she caught herself smiling for no reason. She tried to shake it off, focusing back on work. It's just a client, she told herself. But part of her knew it wasn't that simple anymore. Something about this place, or maybe him, was starting to break through the walls she had built for years. The next morning, they had another meeting to go over the final terms. Things got tense when she suggested a few changes that he didn't agree with. "That's not how we do things here," he said firmly. She replied, "But that's why I'm here, to help you do them better." The silence that followed was heavy. For a moment, both looked at each other, unwilling to back down. Then he sighed and said, "You always have to win, don't you?" She smiled faintly. "It's my job." Later that day, as she left the office, one of the workers called out, "Ma'am, sir left his phone in the conference room." She picked it up and walked back to his office to return it. When she entered, he was sitting quietly, looking at an old photo on his desk. She placed the phone down and noticed the picture. It was of him holding the same little girl from before. She asked softly, "Your daughter?" He shook his head slowly. "My niece. Her mother was my sister. She passed away a few years ago." She didn't know what to say for a moment. His eyes looked distant but calm. "I promised her I'd take care of the little one," he said. "She's the reason I work so hard." She felt something shift inside her. Respect, maybe empathy. She knew what it meant to carry the weight of responsibility alone. After that, their conversation slowly became less formal. He started asking about her city, her work, her life. She told him bits and pieces, how she built her career from nothing, how people used to doubt her, how she learned to stay strong by never letting emotions get in the way. He listened, not with judgment but understanding. Sometimes he made her laugh with small jokes. Sometimes he made her think with quiet advice. By the end of that week, something had changed. The factory no longer felt just like a workplace. She began to enjoy the mornings there. The smell of fresh tea, the noise of workers starting their day, the sight of him walking through the floor, checking everything. She found herself noticing little things. The way he smiled when talking to his niece, the way he helped an old worker lift boxes, the way his eyes softened when he looked at people he cared about. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something real, something she hadn't felt in years. A kind of peace she didn't know she was missing. For the first time, she wasn't rushing through her work. She was living it, feeling it. That night, as she sat by the window of her hotel room looking at the river shining under the moonlight, she felt a strange calm inside. The city lights and noise that once felt like her home now seemed far away. Maybe, she thought, this trip wasn't just about business after all. Maybe it was about finding something she didn't even know she had lost. She smiled softly and whispered to herself, one deal at a time, and deep down without realizing it, her heart had already started a new journey, one that had nothing to do with contracts or signatures, but everything to do with two people whose paths were meant to cross at just the right time. The morning sun came through the window, lighting up her desk covered with papers and coffee cups. She had been awake since early, preparing the updated proposal for the deal. Every number, every chart had to be perfect. Yet her mind wasn't calm like before. It kept wandering back to him, his quiet voice, the way he smiled when talking about his niece, the honesty in his eyes. She shook her head slightly, reminding herself, "Focus, this is business." At the factory, the day started as usual. Workers greeted her politely, and she replied with small smiles. She noticed how everyone seemed to respect him, not out of fear but genuine admiration. He walked around the floor, checking the machines, helping where needed. He wasn't like the big city bosses she was used to. No arrogance, no rush. Just calm leadership. When he saw her coming in, he gave a brief nod and said, "Good morning. Ready for round 2? She laughed softly. "Always." They sat in the small conference room with papers spread across the table. She started explaining the updated deal, how her company would provide modern equipment and training to improve production. He listened carefully but stopped her mid-sentence. "It looks good on paper," he said, "but what if it changes the way our people work? They're used to doing things their way." She leaned forward. "Sometimes change is uncomfortable, but it can bring better results." He smiled faintly. And sometimes rushing change can break things that are already working. For a few seconds, they just looked at each other. It wasn't anger, but something deeper. Two people trying to understand each other's world. The discussion went on for hours. They disagreed, argued a little, then found middle ground. She respected how patient he was, how he never raised his voice even when he didn't agree. He respected how passionate she was, how she stood by her ideas but still listened. By the time they finished, both were exhausted but strangely satisfied. As they walked out, he said, "You argue well. You should have been a lawyer." She laughed for the first time in days. "I get that a lot." Later that afternoon, the power went out at the factory due to some maintenance work. She sat under the tree outside, sipping tea from a small glass. The air was warm and she could hear the sound of birds. He joined her quietly, carrying 2 sandwiches. "The canteen is closed till the power's back," he said. "So you'll have to settle for these." She smiled and took one. "You always have a backup plan." "Years of experience," he said, sitting down beside her. "You learn to prepare for everything." They talked for a while, not about business, but about simple things. Childhood memories, favorite foods, movies they liked. She was surprised how easy it felt to talk to him. There was no pressure, no pretension, just 2 people enjoying a small break from the rush of life. At one point, his niece ran toward them, holding a small flower she had picked. "Look, Uncle, for you," she said proudly. He smiled and took it, thanking her warmly. Then she turned to the woman and offered another small flower. "And one for you too," she said. Her heart softened as she accepted it. "Thank you, sweetheart." The little girl smiled shyly and ran off again. After she left, there was a quiet pause between them. He looked at her and said, "She doesn't open up to strangers easily. You must have made an impression." She looked at the flower in her hand and smiled. "Maybe she just sensed that I needed one." That evening, back at her hotel, she sat near the window again. The same river flowed quietly outside. She looked at the small flower still in her hand. It wasn't expensive or fancy, but it made her feel something warm inside, something she hadn't felt in a long time. The next few days became a rhythm of work and quiet friendship. She would come early, sometimes bringing coffee for both of them. They worked together, discussed ideas, and slowly learned to balance each other's ways. When she was too focused on numbers, he reminded her to look at people. When he hesitated about change, she showed him possibilities. Once during lunch, he said, "You know, you remind me of the river outside town. Calm on the surface, but strong underneath." She looked at him curiously. "And you?" He smiled. "Probably the rocks the river keeps pushing around." They both laughed, but inside something gentle was growing. It wasn't sudden or dramatic, just a slow, steady feeling that made their time together more meaningful. One evening, a small community event was held near the factory to celebrate a local festival. The workers invited her to come. At first, she hesitated. She wasn't used to such gatherings. But when he said, "You should come," "It's good to see the town outside the office," she agreed. The event was simple but full of life. Colorful lights, children running around, music playing from old speakers, the smell of food in the air. She watched people laugh and dance, their joy unfiltered. For the first time in a long while, she felt part of something real. He stood beside her, watching the crowd. "This is why I stayed here," he said quietly. "Life moves slower, but it's honest." She looked at him. "Maybe that's what I've been missing." A little girl tugged at her hand and asked her to join the dance circle. She shook her head shyly, but the girl wouldn't take no for an answer. Before she knew it, she was laughing and moving along with everyone, her heels sinking into the soft ground, her heart light. He watched her from a distance, smiling, the strict businesswoman finally letting go. After the event, they walked together back toward the road. The night was cool and stars filled the sky. "You were right," she said softly. "It's good to slow down sometimes." He looked at her. "And it's good to have someone remind me to dream bigger." There was a long silence after that, not awkward but comfortable, the kind of silence that speaks more than words. The next morning, their final presentation was due. She had worked late into the night, preparing every detail. When she reached the office, he was already there going over reports. They sat together one last time to review everything before sending it to the board. When the meeting ended, the board members were impressed. The deal was almost approved. Everyone shook hands, smiled, and congratulated each other. She should have felt proud, and she did. But somewhere deep inside, she also felt something else. A strange sadness knowing her time here was coming to an end. Later, as she was packing her files, he came to her office. "Congratulations," he said. "You did great." "We did," she corrected him with a smile. He looked around the room and said quietly, "It'll be strange not seeing you here every day." She didn't reply right away. Instead, she looked out the window where the factory yard was busy again. "It's strange for me too," she said softly. "I didn't expect to feel connected to this place." He smiled, trying to hide the emotion in his eyes. Sometimes we find peace where we least expect it. Before leaving, she handed him a folder with the signed papers. "Everything's ready. The project will start next month. My team will handle the rest." He took it, nodded slowly, and said, "Thank you, not just for the work, but for the difference you made here." She smiled faintly. "You made a difference in me too." That evening, she stood near the river again, watching the sunset. The golden light danced on the water, and she thought about everything that had happened, the arguments, the laughter, the quiet talks. She realized how much she had changed in just a few weeks. She had come here for a business deal, focused only on numbers and success. But somewhere between the long meetings and simple lunches, she had found something else: connection, peace, maybe even a glimpse of love. When she returned to her hotel room, she found a small paper bag at her door. Inside was a tiny wooden keychain shaped like a river, with a note that said, "For your next journey, don't forget to rest by the water sometimes." She smiled, tears filling her eyes. She didn't need to read the name at the bottom to know who had left it. That night she couldn't sleep. Her heart was full yet uneasy. She had never been afraid of leaving before, but now, for the first time, she didn't want to. The next morning, as her car waited outside, she looked back at the town one last time. The factory stood quietly in the distance. She took a deep breath and whispered, "Maybe one day, I'll come back." The driver started the car, and as the road stretched ahead, she held the small keychain tightly in her hand. It wasn't just a business trip anymore. It was the beginning of something she never saw coming, something that would soon test her choices, her dreams, and her heart. The city lights greeted her as the car drove through familiar streets. Tall buildings, busy people, and the endless sound of traffic surrounded her again. Everything looked just as she had left it, yet something felt different. The noise that once made her feel alive now only made her tired. It had been a week since she returned from the small town, but her heart hadn't caught up with her body yet. At the office, everyone congratulated her for the successful deal. The board members were pleased, her boss was proud, and her colleagues admired her for getting results so quickly. She smiled, thanked them, and acted as if everything was fine. But when she sat alone at her desk, she caught herself staring at the small wooden keychain on her table, the one shaped like a river. It was a simple thing, but it carried so much of what she missed. Days turned into weeks. Her work life returned to its fast pace, meetings, calls, and deadlines. Yet, in the middle of it all, she found herself remembering the quiet mornings at the factory, the sound of laughter during lunch breaks, the warm smile of a little girl offering her a flower, and most of all, the calm voice that always knew how to steady her thoughts. One evening, after a long day, she sat by the window of her apartment. The city lights shimmered outside, but they felt cold. She wondered what he was doing, if the new project had started, if he was still taking his niece to school, if he ever thought of her too. She picked up her phone several times, thinking of calling him, but stopped herself each time. It wasn't part of the plan. She had come for work, done her job, and left. That was supposed to be the end. But her heart didn't seem to understand that. One afternoon, she received an email from the regional office asking her to return to the town for a quick follow-up inspection. Her heart skipped a beat when she read it. She told herself it was just part of her duty, nothing else. But deep down, she knew this visit meant something more. When she arrived back in town, the air felt exactly the same. Calm, warm, familiar. The same small shops, the same river, the same peaceful faces. As her car passed the factory gates, her chest tightened. When she entered the office, he was standing by the window again, looking at a report. He turned, surprised but smiling softly. "I wasn't expecting you so soon," he said. "I'm just here to check on progress," she replied, trying to sound calm, though her voice felt lighter than before. He nodded, offering her a seat. Everything's been going well thanks to your plan? She looked around and noticed a few new machines installed just as she had proposed. The worker seemed confident using them. You really did it, she said with a proud smile. He laughed lightly. We did it. You gave us the direction. We just followed through. As they walked through the factory floor, the workers greeted her warmly. Some even joked that she had been missed. His niece ran toward her and hugged her leg without hesitation. You came back, the little girl said cheerfully. She bent down and hugged her back. I told you I might, she whispered. The girl showed her a small handmade bracelet. I made this last week. For you, her eyes softened. It's beautiful. I'll keep it. When she looked up, he was watching quietly with that same gentle smile. Something about that moment made her chest ache in the best way possible. Later that day, they had lunch together at a small cafe near the river. It wasn't fancy, just simple food served with warmth. She looked at him as he talked about how things had improved since her visit, how the workers had adapted to the new system. He seemed more relaxed now, more at peace. At one point, he looked at her and said, You seem quieter than before. Everything all right? She smiled faintly. Just thinking how different life feels here. It's strange, but I miss it when I'm away. He nodded. Sometimes peace is louder than noise. You just notice it when you leave. They both laughed softly. For a few moments, there was silence again, but the kind of silence that feels safe. That evening, before heading back to her hotel, they walked by the river. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She looked at the water flowing gently and said, When I was younger, I thought success would fix everything, but sometimes, even after getting what you want, you still feel like something's missing. He glanced at her. Maybe it's not about what you achieve, but who stands beside you while you're achieving it. His words hit deeper than he probably meant them to. She looked at him, her heart suddenly heavy with unspoken things. You always know what to say, she whispered. He smiled gently. Only because you make it easy to be honest. The next few days passed quickly. They worked together on small details, shared quiet meals, and spent time talking about life beyond work. She told him stories from her childhood, how her father taught her to dream big, how she lost friends along the way chasing those dreams. He told her about his sister, how hard it was to raise a child alone, but how it gave him purpose. One evening after the day's work, rain began to fall. The sky darkened and thunder rolled in the distance. She stood near the window of her hotel, watching the rain hit the glass. Just then there was a knock at the door. When she opened it, he stood there slightly wet from the rain, holding an umbrella. I was nearby, he said, smiling. Thought I'd check if you were okay. Power goes out quickly here during storms. She let him in and they sat near the window listening to the rain. The lights flickered once and went out completely. The only light came from the faint glow of the street lamps outside. For a long moment, neither spoke. The sound of rain filled the room like music. Finally, she said softly, You didn't have to come all this way. He looked at her. Maybe I wanted to. Her eyes met his and time seemed to slow down. There was warmth in the air, not from the room but from the quiet connection between them. It wasn't something either of them planned. It just happened, naturally, gently, like rain meeting the earth. But before anything more could be said, the lights came back. She looked away quickly, pretending to check her phone. He stood up, giving a small smile. I should go. Big day tomorrow. She nodded, her heart racing in a way she couldn't control. When he left, she stood by the door for a long time, still feeling the echo of his presence. The next morning, she tried to focus on work, but everything felt different. Every time she looked at him, her thoughts drifted. She wasn't sure if he felt the same, but sometimes she caught him glancing at her too, his eyes holding something he didn't say aloud. Later that evening, while walking through the office, she overheard two workers talking about how he had turned down several business offers from big investors because they wanted to take full control. He said he'd rather grow slowly than lose his honesty. One of them said. She admired that about him, his loyalty to his values, his people, his way of life. It made her realize how much she had changed since meeting him. She no longer saw success only in numbers or contracts. She now saw it in peace and kindness in moments that money could never buy. That night, they met again near the river before she left town the next day. The air was cool and the sound of crickets filled the silence. "I'll be leaving tomorrow," she said quietly. He nodded. "I know. I'm glad you came back, even if it was for work." She looked down, her heart heavy. "Sometimes I wish it was for something more." He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then softly he said, "Maybe it already is." The words lingered between them. The world around seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them standing near the calm river that had silently witnessed their story unfold. When she returned to her hotel, she couldn't sleep. She replayed every moment in her head, the laughter, the talks, the quiet understanding. It wasn't just admiration anymore. It was something deeper, but she was afraid of what it meant, afraid that leaving again would break something she had only just found. By morning, she made her decision. She would go back to the city as planned. Her work demanded it, but she promised herself something. She wouldn't forget what this town had taught her, what he had shown her. As the car drove away once more, she looked at the river in the distance and whispered softly, "Maybe one day I'll come back again, not for business but for the heart." And though he wasn't there to hear it, she knew somehow he would understand. The noise of the city had become normal again, but her heart no longer belonged there. It had been a few weeks since she left the small town, yet it stayed in her mind like a quiet song she couldn't stop hearing. The days were full of meetings, deadlines, and calls, but none of it gave her the peace she once felt sitting near the river or talking to him. She tried to convince herself it was just a passing feeling, something that would fade with time, but it didn't. One evening, she received a call from her boss. "You've been shortlisted for the regional director's position," he said proudly. "It's a huge step forward. The final meeting will be next week, and if all goes well, you'll have to move abroad." She thanked him, her voice steady but her mind spinning. This was what she had worked for all her life, the dream position, the next big success. Yet when she ended the call, she sat silently for a long time. The thought of leaving the country didn't excite her the way it once would have. Instead, it brought a strange ache in her chest. That night, she couldn't sleep. She walked around her apartment, the city lights flashing through the windows. Her thoughts drifted back to the small town, the laughter of the workers, the smell of tea from the canteen, his calm voice, and that soft smile that always reached his eyes. She tried to focus on the promotion, but her heart kept whispering something else. A few days later, she received an email from the factory, a progress report attached with a short note from him. It read, "The new system is working perfectly. Your plan really made a difference. The little one keeps asking when you'll visit again." She read the line 3 times. Her lips curved into a small smile. She wanted to reply right away, but stopped herself. What would she say? That she missed them? That she thought about them more than she should? She typed, "Glad to hear things are going well," and deleted it twice before finally pressing send. The next morning, her assistant entered her office with a big smile. "Congratulations. The board confirmed your promotion. You're moving to London next month." Everyone clapped and celebrated. She thanked them, pretending to be thrilled, but her heart felt heavy. That evening, while going through her files, she came across a folder named River Project. Inside were all the documents from the deal, the first contract, the financial reports, and even the notes she had made during her first visit. She found herself smiling at small things she had scribbled, reminders to check the machines, doodles she made while waiting for him to review the numbers. It all brought back memories she had been trying to forget. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her gallery. There it was, a photo she had taken during the town's small festival. The workers were laughing, children were dancing, and he was standing in the background, smiling. That moment captured everything she missed, the simplicity, the warmth, the peace. Before she realized it, she had already dialed his number. It rang twice before he answered. "Hello?" His voice came through, calm and familiar. "Hi," she said softly. "I just wanted to ask how things are going." There was a small pause before he replied. "Better now that I hear your voice." Her heart skipped a beat. She tried to laugh it off. "That's very polite of you." "It's honest," he said simply. They talked for a while, about work, about life, about nothing in particular. He told her how the workers were improving every week, how his niece had learned to ride her bicycle without falling, and how the town was preparing for another festival. Listening to him felt like sitting near the river again, calm and comforting. When the call ended, she felt both happy and restless. She looked at her calendar, meetings, travel plans, deadlines, all waiting for her. Yet for the first time, none of it felt important. Over the next few days, she went through the motions of work, but her mind was elsewhere. Every time she thought about leaving for London, something inside her pulled back. One evening, she received a message from him. It was a photo of his niece holding a handmade sign that said, "Come visit us soon." Her eyes filled with tears. Without overthinking it, she opened her laptop and booked a ticket for the weekend. She told herself it was just one last visit before moving abroad, a chance to see the project's progress in person. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. When she arrived in town again, the air instantly felt lighter. The moment she stepped out of the car, she saw him standing near the factory gate, waiting. His smile was quiet but full of warmth. "You came back," he said, almost like he didn't believe it. She nodded. "I told you I'd visit again." He looked at her for a second longer, then said softly, "I was starting to think you wouldn't." They spent the day walking through the factory. Everything looked better, smoother, cleaner, more efficient. The workers greeted her happily, and she could feel the pride in their voices. Later, he took her to a small hill near the river, where the sunset could be seen clearly. It was peaceful, just like before. They sat there quietly, watching the sky turn golden. After a long silence, he said, "I heard about your promotion." "That's a big achievement, congratulations." She smiled faintly. "Thank you." He looked at her again, his expression unreadable. "You must be excited." "I should be," she said honestly. "But I'm not sure anymore." "Why?" he asked gently. She looked at the horizon. "Because it means leaving everything behind. My job, my city, my country, and maybe something more." He didn't say anything, but she could feel his eyes on her. The wind blew softly, carrying the scent of rain. After a long pause, he said, "Sometimes life gives us choices that aren't easy. The right one doesn't always look like success." She turned to face him. "And how do you know what's right?" He smiled a little. "When your heart feels at peace with it." The simplicity of his words hit her harder than any advice she'd ever received. She wanted to say something, to tell him how she felt, how her heart had never been quieter than when she was near him. But she couldn't find the words. That night, she stayed longer than planned. His niece insisted they have dinner together. They sat in the small dining area of his home. Simple food, laughter, stories. It felt like a family dinner, something she hadn't experienced in years. At one point, the little girl leaned on her arm and said, "Will you stay this time?" The question caught her off guard. She smiled softly, brushing the child's hair. "I wish I could." Later, when the child had gone to bed, she helped him clean up. The silence between them was heavy but gentle. When she was about to leave, he walked her to her car. "Safe travels," he said quietly. She looked at him, her voice trembling. "What if I don't want to go this time?" He didn't reply right away. After a moment, he said, "Then don't. No one is asking you to." "But my whole life is there," she whispered. "And maybe your whole heart is here," he said softly. Tears welled in her eyes, but she smiled through them. "You always make things sound so simple," he shook his head. "They're not simple, but they're real." That night, she couldn't sleep again. She sat by the window of her hotel, looking at the same river that had once made her feel calm. Now it reflected the confusion inside her. She had everything she ever wanted waiting for her. Success, recognition, a bright future. But none of it made her feel alive. The next morning, she stood by the river one last time before leaving. The sun was rising and the water sparkled like glass. She closed her eyes and let the cool breeze touch her face. She thought about the city waiting for her, the promotion, the dreams she once chased so hard. And then she thought about him. His honesty, his kindness, the peace she felt when he was near. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with grand gestures or big promises. It comes quietly, through simple moments that make life feel whole. When she opened her eyes, she knew her heart had already made the choice. The morning air in the small town was cool and calm, carrying the familiar scent of the river and the fields nearby. She had arrived quietly, taking a train this time instead of a car, wanting to experience the town the way she had when she first came months ago. Everything looked the same, yet somehow it felt different. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as her heart raced. She carried only a small bag, enough for a short stay, and walked slowly toward the factory. Each step brought back memories. The first day she met him, the arguments about numbers and strategies, the laughter over coffee, the little moments with his niece that had made her smile. She had never expected to feel this way about a place or about someone she met only for business. As she approached the factory gate, she saw him. He was standing in the same spot where he had first waited for her, his posture relaxed but alert. He hadn't seen her yet. When she stepped closer, he looked up. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. His expression was a mix of surprise and hope. "You're here," he said softly, almost like a question. "Yes," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I came back." He smiled, a slow, warm smile that reached his eyes. "I wasn't sure you would." "I had to," she said, taking a small step closer. "I realized some things matter more than work, more than success." His eyes softened. "And you found what?" "Someone I can't stop thinking about," she whispered. He didn't say anything for a moment. He just looked at her, his gaze steady and gentle. Then he held out his hand. "Then don't let it go." She took his hand, feeling the warmth and comfort she had missed so much. It wasn't just a touch. It was a promise that this time she wouldn't leave. The little girl ran up to her, shouting, "You came back." She threw her arms around her and she hugged her tightly. "I told you I would," she said softly. They spent the day together, walking through the factory, checking the new machines, and talking to the workers. She felt lighter than she had in months. There was no tension, no pressure, just the quiet understanding that she was finally in the right place, with the right people. After lunch, they sat near the river, the sun shining brightly over the water. He looked at her and said, "You've changed." She smiled faintly. "I think I finally realized what's important. It's not just about achieving things. It's about who stands with you while you achieve them." He nodded. "And maybe who waits for you when you realize it." They laughed softly, the sound blending with the flowing river. There was no need to rush, no need to explain further. They both understood. That evening, they went to a small cafe near the river that had been her favorite on previous visits. The lights were soft, the atmosphere calm. They sat across from each other, talking about life, dreams, and what the future might hold. "I almost left," she said quietly. "I almost went to the city, to the promotion, to the life I thought I wanted." "And?" he asked gently. "But I realized that life isn't just about climbing higher," she said.
"It's about being happy, being with people who make you feel complete."
"And I can't imagine that without you." He reached across the table and held her hand. "I felt the same. I didn't want to admit it, but I was hoping you'd come back." Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." They spent the night walking through the quiet streets under the soft glow of street lamps. The town was asleep, yet it felt alive with the memories of their journey. The first meeting, the arguments, the laughter, the shared moments that had slowly brought them together. As they walked, she noticed how the little things made her heart feel full. The way he glanced at her, the gentle strength in his steps, the calmness he carried even in silence. She had learned that love didn't need grand gestures. It needed honesty, presence, and care. The next day, they visited his niece together. She ran up to them, holding a small bouquet of flowers she had picked herself. "For you," she said, offering them to her aunt with a big smile. She bent down and accepted them, hugging the little girl tightly. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll treasure these forever." He watched quietly, a gentle smile on his face. There was something magical about the simplicity of their life here, the connection between family, work, and the quiet town around them. She realized that this was the life she wanted, the life she had been missing. Later, they sat near the river once more. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth and comfort she had longed for during her time away. "I never thought I could feel this calm," she said softly. He kissed her forehead gently. "That's because you were looking in the wrong place before. Happiness isn't always where you expect it." They sat there for a long time, watching the water flow, listening to the quiet sounds of the town, and feeling the rhythm of their hearts in sync. It was peaceful, real, and exactly what they both needed. Over the next few days, she settled into the rhythm of the town again. She helped with small tasks at the factory, laughed with the workers, and spent time with his niece. It wasn't about work anymore. It was about living in the moment, appreciating the simple joys and being with someone who understood her completely. One evening, as they walked along the riverbank, she stopped and looked at him. "I need to tell you something," she said. He looked at her, attentive and patient. "Anything. I almost didn't come back," she admitted. "I almost left everything behind, this town, you, her, for the city, for the promotion. But I realized, nothing else matters if I don't have this. If I don't have you?" He smiled softly, his eyes shining. "And you came back." "Yes," she said, taking his hand. "And I won't leave again." He pulled her close and they stood together quietly, the river flowing beside them, the sky above them glowing with the last light of the day. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the city, not the career, not the past. Only the present and the love they had found in each other. The following morning, they visited the factory for a small celebration. The workers had arranged a small gathering to welcome her back. There were flowers, simple decorations, and heartfelt words of appreciation. She smiled, feeling truly at home for the first time in years. Later, as she walked with him and his niece, she realized how much had changed. She had come to the town for a business deal focused only on work, numbers, and success. But she had found something far more valuable: love, peace, and a sense of belonging. She looked at him and said softly, "I never thought a business trip could change my life like this." He smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "Sometimes life surprises us. The right people, the right place, and the right moment can make all the difference." They spent the rest of the day together, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet moments. The little girl ran ahead, calling out to them, her laughter echoing through the streets. They walked slowly, enjoying each step, knowing that this time, they had found what they were searching for all along. As evening fell, they stood near the river one last time before she returned to her small rented house in town. She looked at the water, the reflection of the sky shimmering on its surface. She felt a sense of completion, a feeling that she had never experienced before. "I'm staying," she said softly, almost to herself. He looked at her, understanding perfectly. "And we'll make it work, together." Her heart swelled with happiness. For the first time in years, she felt completely at peace. She realized that life was not just about chasing dreams or achieving goals. It was about finding someone to share those moments with, someone who made every day brighter, every challenge lighter, and every joy more meaningful. That night, they sat by the river holding hands, watching the stars appear one by one. The town was quiet, the water flowed gently, and the world felt infinite yet intimate. She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth and love she had longed for, the love she had found when she least expected it. For her, the business deal had been only the beginning. The real reward was the love she had discovered, the love that had waited patiently for her, the love that now would stay with her forever. And as they sat together, watching the night sky and listening to the river, she realized something profound. Sometimes, the greatest deals in life aren't signed on paper. They're signed in the heart, quietly, gently, and irrevocably. She smiled, feeling the truth of those words in every beat of her heart.